The repair shop felt like a hug on screen, a snug barn where battered treasures found new life. Yet buried under each gentle grin was a secret, so heavy it bent the beams of that very barn. By the time you hear the whole tale, you will understand how one hidden trauma nearly cracked the happiest workshop on earth. Nothing about the show screamed for attention. No neon lights, no thunderous music, no staged shouting matches. All it offered was a tender thrill of real human care, something modern television quietly lost while chasing louder thrills. Inside that Sussex workshop, dust floated in golden shafts of daylight, while master craftspeople toiled in near silence. A music box that once soothed a sleepy child, a kitchen clock that marked a grandfather's mornings, a teddy bear stitched by loving hands long gone. Each one carried a lifetime of feeling. Every cracked hinge and frayed thread unlocked grief, love, and legacy. The team proved that scars are not shameful, that shattered things can return stronger, and that worn edges often hide the sweetest stories. Guests wept, experts wept, even viewers at home wept. Holding someone else's pain on camera day after day is a sacred task. Yet that holiness also drains a heart until it aches. Audiences adored the show for its warmth, but that warmth came from humans pouring out more empathy than they sometimes possessed. Among those quiet heroes, none carried a heavier load than leather specialist Susie Fletcher. When Susie slid into frame in 2018, she rolled out her tools, bowed her head, and started stitching. She felt as if she had always belonged there, though viewers had met her only seconds earlier. Few knew that Susie had just flown home after years abroad. Her husband, Rob, lost a brutal fight with pancreatic cancer, leaving her adrift. Returning to Britain was not only about mourning, it was about rising from the ashes of something even darker. She felt hollow, craving routine and silence, not an audience. Her brother, expert clockmaker Steve Fletcher, believed the barn could steady her, so she dipped a cautious toe into television like a survivor testing cold water after a storm. Cutting, stitching, and burnishing demanded full focus. The steady rhythm grounded her shredded nerves. Her tools spoke louder than any interview, letting her share tenderness without exposing raw wounds. She was a calm eye of the storm, listening more than speaking, treating every repair with hush-hush reverence. What looked like professional grace was actually personal survival, each finished piece stitching another thread into her own healing. Piece by piece she returned to herself, though she rarely said why. The barn restored heirlooms while quietly restoring the saddler who mended them. As seasons passed, Susie stayed private, moving with quiet dignity. Viewers saw kindness, but not the shadows that clung to her shoulders. In 2023, she finally spoke. Not only had she lost her husband to cancer, she had endured 15 years of intimate abuse in silence. Rob could swing from loving to violent in a heartbeat, and once choked her so hard she thought life was ending. He battled demons rooted in a brutal childhood, and those demons lashed out at the one person who loved him. Susie managed daily danger by shrinking her world, believing secrecy was safer than exposure. Inside that kind barn, she had learned to cradle other people's grief, yet kept her own hidden. Survivors often swallow pain because speaking aloud can feel like stepping off a cliff. Better to keep breathing quietly than risk another blow. Now viewers know that behind the sweetest show on television lurked the survivor stitching her heart back together one leather strap at a time. The repair shop healed heirlooms on screen, but off screen it also tried to heal the healer, proving that even the most nurturing places can echo with unspoken cries for help. The day her husband died in 2013 brought a knot of feelings that refused to untangle. Grief swept in, yet behind it lurked a strange breath of freedom, then a punch of guilt that often shadows survivors of abuse. Whom do you mourn when the abuser passes? The person they were, or the dream of who you prayed they might become? That riddle haunted Susie every dawn after the funeral. By the moment she strolled into repair shop, none of that hurt had been healed. She had folded it tight like a battered suitcase and shoved it to the back of her mind, hidden but humming. 10 years later, her decision to share the truth was more than release. It was a shockwave for fans who had watched her soothe everyone else. Suddenly, they saw that the gentle healer had been quietly piecing herself together all along. Shows such as The Repair Shop flowed in a soft middle ground, neither raw documentary nor scripted drama, where real hearts open under warm lights. For Susie, that middle space became gift and weight at the same time. On screen, she looked steady enough to cradle a century-old saddle or a trembling memory. Yet every ounce of openness inside the barn echoed her own locked-away grief. Turning work into therapy, each measured stitch, each slow pull of sturdy thread gave her pulse a calming rhythm. For a trauma survivor, that kind of routine can feel like air itself. The flip side soon appeared. Guests arrived clutching fragile relics, voices shaking as they poured out stories of death and survival. Susie absorbed every tear, every laugh, offering kindness while never spilling her own pain. Co-workers teased lightly. Even Richard Biggs joked that he had a crush on her, yet behind the humor sat quiet respect. They sensed she was carrying far more than she let on. Invisible emotional labor stacks up like unseen bricks, and even the toughest backbone can start to bend. While she mended objects for the camera, she began to hear a whisper inside that begged for her own repair. There's electricity when a silent person finally chooses words. Susie had sealed her past not from shame, but from pure survival, building her days on strength and constant motion. That scaffolding held until 2023, when she released The Sun Over the Mountains, a memoir whose very title promised light after night. It was more than a story. It was a quiet rebellion. She laid out the fear, the confusion, the endless seasons of walking on eggshells. She described the night. He squeezed her throat until she thought, "I honestly thought I was going to die." The calm way she wrote it made the line thunder. The book was closure, not spectacle. As she wrote, she discovered that truth could bind wounds the way saddle stitch binds leather, firm and clean. After the book aired, fans replayed old episodes with fresh eyes. Every silent nod, every blink-back tear now glowed with deeper meaning. She had not only felt empathy, she had mirrored their pain within her own chest. The mask never shattered. It slid aside at her pace. And when it did, the image of Susie did not break. It gained gravity and honesty. Yet honesty ripples. Once her story lived in public, the delicate balance she had built inside the barn began to tilt. The peaceful workshop carried a heavier echo. The repair shop was never just a set. It was an emotional greenhouse. Every object arrived wrapped in aching memory, and memory can weigh more than iron. To listen to a guest describe a mother's final hours, to feel a child's voice tremble while talking about a lost grandparent, then turn back to your bench and sow through the ache that is labor of the heart, unseen but real. Filming days stretched long, tears stalled production, and even the most stoic craftsperson sometimes stepped outside to breathe. Yet the schedule pressed on. Susie became the barn's steady keel. Her quiet was not emptiness, it was capacity, a vast room for other people's stories. But when you always hold space for others, who hold space for you? That silent question lingered until the weight began to show not in outbursts but in weariness, burnout, and moments where she drifted away from the bench. Bit by bit, she realized that the next heirloom needing repair was her own spirit. The barn had helped, but the final stitching had to happen beyond those cameras, in a room where she could breathe without carrying anyone else's grief. She began to wake before sunrise, the hour when the world is quiet and the mind cannot hide. In those moments, she felt the ache in her shoulders that no massage could fix, proof that the heart can live inside the muscles. When the crew called lunch breaks, she often stayed at the bench, polishing buckles or softening cracked leather with careful fingertips. That focus looked like dedication. It was also a shield against silence that might let old memories roar. Some evenings she drove home through country lanes with the radio off, letting the hum of tires sing a low lullaby. Inside her chest, questions fluttered like trapped birds, asking if healing was real or only a story we tell to keep moving. Friends invited her to weekend gatherings, but crowded rooms left her jittery. She preferred a quiet cup of tea with a cat curl at her feet, breathing in the gentle scent of saddle soap that lingered on her hands. During school visits, younger viewers pressed her with bright eyes, asking how to become artisans. She smiled wide and told them to practice patience. Yet inside, she whispered a second lesson: be gentle with your own scars. The more she spoke in public, the more she felt the tremor of old fear. Yet she kept stepping forward. Each interview was another stitch, each signing a new knot pulled tight. When fans thanked her for inspiring them to chase craft, not fame, she felt a small spark of pride melt a patch of lingering shame. Abuse lies to its victims. But every handshake proved those lies wrong. Production days grew longer as the show gained popularity, and the barn bustled with fresh crew and brighter lights. The extra attention felt like both celebration and surveillance. Between takes, she sometimes stared at the rafters, watching dust swirl like tiny planets in a sunbeam. The sight reminded her that even broken pieces can dance when the light hits right. One winter morning, a guest arrived with a cracked riding crop that once belonged to her late mother. As Susie stitched a leather wrap, she felt a quiet resonance, a silent sisterhood across the workbench. That day, she finally allowed herself a break, stepping outside to breathe the crisp air. The skies stretched wide and cold yet offered calm, and for the first time she let a tear roll without wiping it away. Later that week, she shared a gentle laugh with Jay Blades about Miss Slade Hammer, a laugh that rang truer than any before. Healing rarely happens in one leap. It happens in tiny, real moments that string together like beads. She also started journaling at night, scribbling memories that surfaced during work. Some pages were soaked with tears. Others ended with bold, underlined words of gratitude. The barn continued to fix heirlooms, and each success echoed through social media with joyful comments. Yet behind every viral clip stood a team learning how to carry their own feelings while honoring others. Producers quietly arranged mental health help after noticing the team's fatigue, a gesture that showed growth, though the public never knew. Caring for carers became part of the mission. Susie accepted the guidance with humble relief. Talking to a counselor felt strange at first, but soon the sessions became as essential as sharpening a knife edge. With practice, she began to set gentle limits, taking breathing pauses during shoots and allowing herself to say, "I need a moment," without apology. Those small sentences felt like revolutions. The show thrived, but its heartbeat slowed to a healthier pace. Viewers still cried, repairs still dazzled, yet behind the scene the artisans learned to exhale after holding so much sadness. Even now, Susie practices the same steady crafts, though with a lighter heart. She still keeps Rob's wedding ring in a velvet pouch, a relic of both love and pain, proof that two truths can live together. That little pouch reminds her to honor the past without letting it chain her spirit. Each time she folds it shut, she whispers, "You did your best," and that is enough. Soon after her memoir, letters poured in from survivors around the world thanking her for speaking out. She read every note, storing them in a wooden box that once held tool parts, turning it into a chest of shared strength. Those letters helped her see she was never alone, that courage moves in circles, touching one heart, then another, then back again. Step by step, she understood that the barn, the book, the tears, and even the silence were all pieces of the same mosaic. Healing was not a single moment. It was a path. She walked one careful stride at a time. On the surface, everything about the show still looked the same, but inside the barn, a quiet kind of exhaustion was settling in. That deep emotional weight, the kind that builds slowly, had started to pull everything down. And just as that weight was becoming too heavy to carry, a much louder disruption crashed into their peaceful world. It came like a storm. Jay Blades' fall. Until 2024, Jay was untouchable. He was a repair shop, the voice, the welcome, the warmth. He didn't just host a show, he held it together. Audiences trusted him. He translated emotion into comfort. He stood in the barn doorway every week and reminded us, gently, that every object had a story. But suddenly, the story changed. At first, it was whispers, then headlines, then hard facts. Jay had been charged. The details were still unfolding, but the tone of the show shifted instantly. The BBC reacted fast. Episodes were yanked, tours were pushed, and the air inside the barn turned cold. This wasn't just about Jay's legal issues. It was about the collapse of everything he symbolized. He wasn't just a host. He was the barn's voice, the one who gave the whole thing its heart. And now, that heart had a crack in it. The warmth turned uneasy. The calm turned tense. Viewers didn't just feel shocked. They felt betrayed, not just by the man, but by the show's entire spirit. For someone like Susie, already walking a fragile emotional line, the shift was more than uncomfortable. It was deeply unsettling. The barn had been her refuge, her anchor, the one place that had always felt safe. And now, even that wasn't immune. The ripple spread fast. Behind the scenes, insiders said morale dipped. Momentum slowed. Conversations turned cautious. The show, once praised for its raw emotional openness, now felt locked in silence. The cracks that had quietly been forming, they started to split wider. But maybe the most revealing part wasn't the scandal itself. It was the silence that followed. The BBC kept things vague. They delayed events. They skipped direct answers. Jay stepped back, but so did the clarity. So did the honesty. And those had always been a repair shop's strongest traits. The storm came, and even if no one said it out loud, it left damage behind. After the dust settled, there was no final episode, no dramatic cancellation. The barn didn't fall, but something inside it faded. Tour dates quietly shrank. Posters showed familiar faces, but fans noticed something strange. Some of those people, especially Susie Fletcher, weren't actually showing up. Social media went quieter. Loyal fans started asking the same question: where is everyone? The real shift wasn't just about who was there, it was about the energy. The spirit felt different. That cozy emotional comfort, it wasn't wrapping the audience the same way anymore. Even viewers who couldn't quite explain it felt it. Insiders whispered that burnout was creeping in. The emotional core of the show, once its biggest strength, was now taking its toll. The experts were tired. The stories started blending together. The magic formula that once felt so effortless now felt strained. And at the center of it all, the biggest silence of all, Susie. She didn't make an exit. There was no farewell, no tribute, no quiet goodbye. She just disappeared. And somehow, that hit harder than any headline. Susie wasn't the loudest voice. She wasn't flashy, but she was the soul, the steady rhythm at the show's heart. Without her, something shifted. The balance was off. The BBC tried to hold it all together. The barn still stood. The lights still glowed. But more and more, it felt like a display of what the show used to be, like a museum pretending it was still alive. And nobody said it out loud. But that silence, it screamed. There was no headline, no statement, just a quiet moment hiding in plain sight. She hasn't done anything for a year. That soft comment from Richard Biggs might have slipped by, but fans paying close attention, they felt the earth move. Susie Fletcher, the quiet center of the show, hadn't appeared in a single episode in over 12 months. No goodbye, no montage, not even a blog post, just absence. And that absence thundered. For a while, no one noticed. She had always stayed in the background, never chasing the spotlight. But the longer she stayed away, the louder her silence became. The barn wasn't the same without her. The emotional glue that once held everything together now felt fragile, stretched thin. Why did she leave? There wasn't a scandal. No drama. Just a woman who had already given everything she had to give. Some stories don't end with a bang. They fade gently, like the final note of a lullaby. And Susie's exit, quiet, invisible, and deeply felt, was one of them. For years, Susie had poured her heart into the emotional labor of the barn. She helped others restore their cherished keepsakes while carrying her own invisible weight, trauma, grief, and survival. And maybe one day, she realized something important. It was time to stop holding everyone else together and start healing herself. There's something deeply human about that kind of decision. No drama, no spotlight, just a quiet boundary set by someone who finally understood what she needed. But her choice to step back didn't just close a personal chapter. It quietly shifted the show's entire story. When Susie left, something essential slipped through the cracks. Not ratings, not money, something harder to measure. The soul of the barn, the quiet, steady empathy that held everything together, started to fade. By then, her memoir had taken on a life of its own. The Sun Over the Mountains wasn't just a book. It was a mirror, a reflection not only of her journey, but of what the show truly stood for. Inside, Susie opened up about the trauma she endured, the heartbreak she lived through, and how she slowly began to rebuild her sense of self. She didn't write with rage. She wrote with clarity, with strength, with a kind of wisdom that only comes after years of holding pain in silence. As the pages turned, it became clear. The memoir wasn't just her story. It was a map of the show's emotional foundation, because the repair shop was never just about antiques. It was about memories, about sorrow, about hope. Each repair was a metaphor for healing something deeper inside, and Susie's story followed that exact arc. She had been broken. She found a rhythm, a refuge, a place where she could mend quietly, piece by piece. And when the time was right, she walked away, not broken, but whole in a new way. What made the memoir so powerful wasn't just the raw truth. It was what it revealed about the show itself, that the emotion, the tears, the tenderness, the connection wasn't created in editing rooms. It was real. It came from the people inside the barn. And now, one of those people had finally said it out loud. This was real for me too. In doing so, Susie gave us something the show never had, a sense of closure, an emotional ending that the cameras never captured. So what happens when the heart quietly leaves a room? Technically, the show goes on. The BBC still takes submissions. The website still runs. Clips still pop up online. That familiar theme song still plays in reruns. But something has shifted. You can feel it, like walking into an old house where everything is in place, except the warmth. Susie's name has vanished from the credits. Jay Blades remains, though his presence feels blurred, still clouded by the controversy. The rest of the team carries on, doing the work. But the energy, the pulse that once made the show feel so alive, feels dimmer. What we're seeing now is a version of the show, not the show itself. The repairs, the reveals, the gentle talks, they're all still there, but the emotional weight behind them doesn't land quite the same. You can replicate the format, but not the feeling. And the audience, they sense it. Even if they don't say it outright, they know something's missing. Maybe they missed the way Susie's quiet presence brought balance to a tearful guest. Maybe they missed the original chemistry. Or maybe they just missed knowing that the show was once built on real emotional investment, not just production polish. The barn hasn't collapsed, but it's changed. What's left is something that still looks familiar, still functions, but feels like a shadow of what it once was. A shell, a set, missing that invisible thread that used to tie everything together. In the end, it wasn't scandal. It wasn't poor ratings. It was something quieter. It was a secret, a wound carried in silence. And by the time anyone realized how deep it ran, it was too late to stitch it shut. Because sometimes, when something precious breaks, you can fix it. And sometimes, you have to accept it's time to let it go. The repair shop without its heart. This wasn't just a story. It was something far more human. The show didn't fall apart all at once. It came undone slowly, one emotional thread at a time. First, through silent suffering, then through controversy, and finally, through the quiet exits of the people who gave it meaning. Susie Fletcher's hidden pain was a fault line running beneath it all, proof that even in spaces built to heal, the ones doing the healing can still be breaking inside. And that was what made the show special to begin with. It was never really about furniture or clocks or toys. It was about resilience, about grace, about giving people and things the space to be whole again. But even grace has limits, and when it's not returned, it runs out. Now, what remains is a beautifully lit barn, skilled hands, a familiar rhythm, but without the soft soul that once made it feel sacred.